I'd like to call back to order a meeting of the Board of Selectmen, and I'd like to begin this open meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is the November 13th open session minutes as written. Those are included in our agenda. I assume we've all had a chance to review. And unless there are any changes, do I hear a motion for approval?
Motion to approve minutes as written.
Motion made by Selectman Nobley. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Selectman Valencourt. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That passes. And so under communications and announcement, I'm sure none of us are wondering why this meeting is well attended this evening by members of our school committee. I'd like to specifically call upon the chairwoman of the school committee, Amy Mabley, who had asked to come before us this evening and has patiently waited to share some great news with us and perhaps the rest of the community. I don't know, we were locked away, so thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for letting us announce the fact that Mr. Greg Gilligan has been unanimously voted by the North Andover School Committee to be our next superintendent of schools, beginning on July 1st. I won't take up any more of your time, but we're very enthusiastic, and you'll be hearing more, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you to the school committee. I'd like to personally call out the chairwoman because I know that she led a very thorough process, and I'm grateful for the role that you let the Board of Selectmen play by allowing us to appoint Selectman Keene to serve on the search committee. I know that this was a very labor-intensive process, so thank you, and thank you for your patience this evening. That was it from the audience. I don't know if any other selectmen have any announcements before we jump into the big topic this evening. No. And so we have before us this evening our great town manager giving us our financial forecast for 2019 to 2023.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, the big news of the night is clearly Mr. Gilligan's promotion to a very well-deserved role. Our partnership with the school department, this board with the school committee, and this administration with the school administration has been at the center of all the good news that's come out of the community in the last 5 years, in my opinion. Not that there are other good stories as well, but our ability to get things done, one only needs to get the emails I receive from a lot of folks in the community, cutting and pasting newspaper articles from other communities on how challenging it can be when communities don't partner with one another and develop the kinds of relationships that we have with the school department. It centers around this board who strives to make sure that we remain professional and all working in the best interest of the community, and it certainly continues through the school committee and the school administration. And I have no doubt that is it superintendent-elect? How does that work? That the next superintendent of schools will follow the great example of the current superintendent, Jen Price, and partner with us as we proceed and move the district and the entire community forward. So I'm very excited about that opportunity. So with that, I'll give you a 5-year forecast. I know everybody's been waiting. I'd like to think everybody was waiting just for me, but that's probably not realistic, so we'll proceed. We every year give you an outline of the budget development process. This material in really small print is posted online. It shows really that there are many steps before we get from this particular day to May town meeting this year, scheduled at May 15th, and that process has been underway for a couple of months and will continue aggressively now. Right after this process, we start to move forward with the capital improvement plan, ultimately the budget. I meet with the Finance Committee tomorrow night to talk a little bit about this five-year forecast and other things. So the process is well underway to make sure that as we approach town meeting, we have a thoughtful capital plan and budget going into 2019. Every year we repeat and remind people of our mission and vision. I think the vision of particular importance. The town of North Andover is dedicated to serving residents and to creating a community in which residents may join together for the common good. Ultimately, the thing that has made us successful is that we are doing what's right for the people who live here. We're not interested in self-interest, and the decisions that have been made by the elected officials and the key leaders in the community have been reflective of the benefits of working together for the common good of the residents. We have accomplished a lot over the last several years. We brought ourselves from an area, a very difficult time in 08 and 09 for all municipalities throughout the Commonwealth. North Andover was certainly not alone in that regard. and began certainly in 2011 and beyond to try to create some stability, focused on the idea of stewardship, bringing the community forward. And there are certain basic principles that we keep on repeating and have lived by. Control the appetite of unsustainable growth. The reality is we live within our means. We have been successful in moving the community forward with new programs. We'll talk about some of those as this presentation goes forward. But in reality, we haven't got ahead of ourselves. We've recognized the need to have reserves. We adopted a reserve policy. This board and the Finance Committee have adopted the reserve policy and updated and adopted it again. And therefore, we're remembering the fact that we must save money first. If we put all dollars toward programs and don't have savings, then we become unstable in the long term. That employee costs are a major driver, and that is not a criticism to our employees. It's a factual reality of both the private sector, nonprofit sector, and the public sector. That employee costs, especially in the area of retirement and health insurance, have remained difficult to manage, and I think we've done a pretty credible job to date on that. We've improved strategic partnerships. We've done more in public-private partnerships. We've seen a lot of infrastructure improvements that have come with relationships, enhanced relationships with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In one case with Merrimack College in the Commonwealth, investing more than $2 million in the college gateway that is continuing to come into shape, and I think looks better than it has in the past. We've partnered with the Commonwealth most recently in a $2.7 million grant, along with a development company that's going to build 192 residential units along 125. We've partnered with the Commonwealth in the area of Massachusetts Avenue in terms of improvements, and the Safe Routes to School project, which is nearly $1.6 million. We continue to look for and emphasize the benefit of public-private partnerships to enhance how we're able to improve our community. The continued upgrades to infrastructure, we know the facility master plan. We now know there are many communities throughout the Commonwealth attempting to emulate that plan. We've had more success than I think any other community in Merrimack Valley in improving our assets. We move forward today on the precipice of executing contracts for a new kindergarten facility to create a combined early childhood center and kindergarten facility, which in the long term will benefit our entire school system. We're about to open an expanded DPW facility. We sit in one of the best town halls in all of Merrimack Valley, I would say the best. And it's all a function of our focus on infrastructure, investing more than $1.2 million annually in our roadways. And with the help of DPW, we'll be rolling out a more comprehensive and thoughtful sidewalk program to start to link pedestrians to our vital assets. We always are looking for new revenues. Last year, one of those was a pilot agreement with Osgood Solar, which will bring more than it's approximately $86,000 a year over a 20-year period, significant amount of dollars into the community over the next 20 years. We're close to, have agreed in principle to a solar pilot with the Brooks School folks, which will bring another $300,000 over the next 20 years to the community. Continue to look for ways to explore or expand our revenues, because it's those revenues, those sustainable revenues, that help drive our ability to continue providing services. And I would certainly note that we have worked diligently with Chris McClure in our IT department to do more than I think most communities do in the area of information technology. We've seen that in our website, the website enhancements, our increased presence in social media, nearly 5,000 followers on Twitter. We communicate well with our residents around. We're constantly pushed in that area by this board, and we appreciate that. We're going to roll out a concept of partnering with a company which will allow for Alexa, Amazon Alexa devices or Alexa-enabled devices to be used in the homes of North Andover, and residents will be able to ask when the next public meeting is. It'll tell them when and where, all on Alexa. You'll see that next month. So we continue to try to find creative ways to move technology forward. If we can just change it to some other name, it would be helpful, but that'll work for now. As it relates to the 5-year forecast, which is a couple of slides up, here are the assumptions we're using moving forward. That the tax levy increases by 2.5%. That's what the statute says, and that's what is proposed over the next 5 years. That new growth, which represents the additions to our tax base through either new buildings or improvements to existing buildings, will grow from 600 to 650,000. We've historically, over the last decade, used 600,000, but we've consistently seen that number increase, and we feel comfortable moving forward with 650,000 over the next 5-year period. The debt exclusion figure is the actual debt exclusion. We see a substantial portion of that debt exclusion rolling off in this coming fiscal year, dropping from about 1.9 to about $600,000, which means the 20-year period for certain projects has expired or has been paid off. It's largely attributable to the Thompson Middle School and Osgood Hill projects, or Osgood Hill purchase. Local receipts, which are driven by our motor vehicle revenue, are increasing by 3.55% in 19 and 3% in each year thereafter. Again, the largest driver to that is more than $4 million in motor vehicle excise tax. We always use motor vehicle excise tax to tell us a little bit about what's happening in the local economy. People buy more cars. They turn cars over more often when the economy is good. We're seeing that in an upward trend of motor vehicle excise tax. Fiscal 19 state aid projected to be level funded from what was approved by the state legislature at the end of 18, a couple of months ago. It's a common practice of ours to be conservative about state aid. It should be noted last year we received only about a $190,000 increase to state aid, and when you decrease that by the loss in some additional school funding that came in off the balance sheet, we had a net state aid of increase of about $60,000, pretty modest. But other decisions we're making are helping us fight through that and make sure we're moving services in a positive directions. Operating transfers come things like our enterprise funds, give money back to the general fund because of certain functions that are performed here in Town Hall and in other places that we're entitled to reimbursement for. Whoop, we were stuck here. Oh, bear with me. Sorry. I wanted to give you a sense of where the revenue allocation is, gives you a little, let me bounce back, revenue allocation is. This is the breakdown of where the primary revenue sources come from. I always like to look back in 07. In 07, 69% of our revenues came from the tax levy, from taxes. That number grew and has capped out at 77% in fiscal 14, largely attributable not to budgetary growth, but to the fact that state aid started to level off a decline as we got from 07 to 08, especially through the late part of the first decade of this century. We've seen a leveling off of state aid, or not a great appreciation. In years past the 90s, state aid went up $300,000-$400,000, right? We're now seeing much more modest growth in state aid, and therefore, as we need to pay for things, it's required other sources to fund those. And we see in fiscal 19, the expectation is that both local receipts and state aid will pay approximately the same, and that we've leveled off or dropped by 1% in terms of what the tax levy covers as it relates to our revenue stream. As it relates to expenses, in this 5-year forecast, we're assuming that health insurance will increase by 2% for fiscal 19, an extremely modest number. The average over the last 3 years has been a little over 4.1% each year for the last 3 years. There's a chart further up that I feel is a really good demonstration of the success of moving from a self-funded project, self-insured product to the GIC has allowed us in terms of budgetary flexibility. And in future years, we should assume, again, about a 6.5% increase in 20, and then from 21 to 23, that number will be approximately 7%. We're hoping in the end that those numbers are more modest than that, but to be conservative about this projection, we've included those figures. Other personnel benefits, including retirement, up around 7.5% to 9%. It should be noted that the retirement appropriation on an annual basis goes up by about 8% a year and will continue to do so for the next several years. That assumes that the market remains strong. If the market works against us, then the assets in that fund, which are managed by the Essex Regional Retirement System, will start to go the other way. So it's important to us that the stock market remains strong. There's an assumption on the return on investment for this system of, I believe that now it's 7.75%. So in years like this year, when they're higher than that, that helps us make sure that we're protecting against years when they're not so good. Debt service figures are those ones that are already baked into our debt service schedule or will be in the capital plan, which you will receive in a couple of weeks. General government spending for fiscal 19 is 4.5%. That number is, of course, higher than common. It should be noted that the reason that is not a more common 3% is because of included funding or will be in the budget submittal. They will be hiring a new licensed mental health professional full-time that will start to address some of the concerns we have in the community. We've commented that it's one of the goals, strategic goals of the Board of Selectmen, and by increasing that salary into the general fund, it's making that figure for 19 look higher than it typically would be in terms of budget growth. Some more assumptions, support services, which are those areas like procurement and accounting and those, auditing and the like, is going up by 3%. School department recommended funding will increase by 3.65%. This has been communicated to the superintendent. We'll continue to have conversations with them as the process evolves. 3.5% in each of the years from 20 to 23. The state assessments, those charges, folks don't often realize that the state gives us money, but the state also takes money away. Annually, the state charges us for certain fees. The fact that the MBTA runs through the community, we actually get charged a fee. And so there's a fair amount of assessments we receive from the Commonwealth for the services that they provide to all residents in the Commonwealth. We're expecting that those are going to increase at approximately 2.5% per year. We're expecting public safety and public works to increase at approximately 3.5% a year over the 5-year period. So what does that all mean? It means really small numbers on a page, and strategically, all of the selectmen are now blocking the bottom line, which is really good. As is common, I've been here, I will have my 6-year anniversary, I think, next week here in the town of North Andover. This is not uncommon in terms of how you see this layout. Let me help you with those numbers for those further in the back of the room or who may have difficulty seeing this. Even with those estimates I've provided, currently we still have to close a $109,000 gap within fiscal 19. So with the assumptions you have, 3.5% increase in public works and public safety, 3.65 for schools, and approximately 3% everywhere else, we still need to find additional revenue or reduce expenses to the tune of about $109,000 to close the gap at 19. This doesn't mean we won't explore the possibility of enhancing revenues beyond that and looking at other budgetary growth. In 20 and each year, it gets exponentially worse, and that's because we get more conservative about our expenditure estimates and more conservative about our revenue estimates. And so this is intended to remind us all that we are not in a community, not that many are, that all the numbers just sort of fall into place, and we can easily sort of dance through the future with everything, you know, growing at some pace that is not, that does not need to be reasonably managed. And in the end, when you get to year 5, if we continue to grow at the paces I've said and we can't find additional revenues or control expenses better, we're looking at a deficit just south of $5 million. This approach of conservative view of financing is one that the board has endorsed. This common layout that the deficits grow over a 5-year period, I think you're all probably pretty used to seeing. We've been successful at focusing on the long term, so what you may see is a $5 million deficit today in 23. We hope will look more like the $109,000 deficit 5 years from now when I'm sitting in front of you. And that's our goal in the long term. This gives you a pie chart breakdown of where we spend our dollars. Again, a little bit small on the print, and we increase that. But we're spending approximately 12% on public safety, 50% on schools, pretty common in most communities. Health insurance represents about 12% of our budget. Debt service about 5%, which is a nice, healthy number. We're lower than most as it relates to debt service as a percentage of budget, and it's something that's important that we maintain. The public works budget is about 5% of the total. So general government, public works, and represent 10%. You have public safety about 22%. And it's interesting to know that the general government plus public works is a pretty big department. Both those together are actually less of the budget than the health insurance alone. And it shows how controlling health insurance is particularly important. With that, the other piece, although we've done a really effective job with the health insurance, we continue to have to manage it. We also should note that retirement is that other cost that goes up steadily or at beyond numbers that we otherwise would like to control. I mentioned that they go up at approximately 8% per year. This shows how much retirement will be when we get out to 2026. More than $7 million of the budget. Which is pretty significant, right? So if we look back to 19, that number is sitting around 5 million. 5 years ago, that number was closer to just under 4 million, and at some point, it's going to grow to be north of 7 million. So compared to the rest of the budget, the retirement appropriation is growing faster, probably 2 times as fast as most other expenditures. So the percentage that the retirement appropriation makes up of the total is growing fairly fast, and it's something we continue to have to be mindful of. We're part of the Essex Regional Retirement System. They have approximately $350 million in assets. We represent 15% of that entire system, and they have an unfunded liability of somewhere in the tune of, I think they're about 53% funded. So not as aggressively funded as we'd like them to see, as we would like to see. One of my favorites here is the chart of where we would be if we hadn't made changes to health insurance dating back to 15. The upward red line, or reddish line, represents where we would have expected health insurance rates to go to fiscal 25 if we had not made a change in health insurance rates. The lower level represents where we are today based on reasonable projections moving forward. The delta is that between fiscal 15 and fiscal 25, we would need to have spent $15.7 million more in health insurance than we will as a function of having made the decisions. So this board's leadership on needing to maintain those benefits of providing a good product for an employee that's affordable looks to be saving in a tune of $15.7 million over 10 years. Pretty significant stuff. We're looking to extend that agreement with the PEC so that the GIC will continue to be offered for the next 3 years after that agreement expires. That would extend us into 2022, which is, so a number of years, almost extends to the end of this 5-year period. So I'm coming to an end. This is my favorite confusing chart. These are all the things, on a daily basis to sort of keep this going. These are the things we juggle, some positive, some negative, right? So we're juggling the cost of employee benefits with the rising cost of snow and ice. We've spent more than $2 million in the last 2 years in snow and ice, with making sure we find ways to fund things like curriculum, make sure we can create stability in the school system with the sped stabilization, saving money on energy, making sure we had succession planning, saving money on health insurance, balancing the rising cost of OPEB, and doing all of that, remaining focused on simply one thing. We are a better community when we think about where we want to be than if we just think about today, bottom line. And we've done a really effective job of understanding where we want to be, and the end result is the bottom of my pyramid there, which is our AAA, which is something we take great pride in having achieved from Standard & Poor's. So here are the benefits. To date, we've been able to go from a AA non-positive outlook to a AA positive outlook to a AAA bond rating, the highest possible bond rating you can have. There's no reason to believe that's changing if we follow down this path. We'll be able to reduce elementary classroom size. We certainly are focused on continuing to do that. It's an important joint initiative between the school department and the Board of Selectmen. I would also say there's a collateral benefit to helping reduce the impact on support services of certain school personnel, nurse, counselors, and others, who by making sure we're building a kindergarten facility will have less students to have to service on a daily basis, because that can be extremely difficult to do. And we're upgrading our facilities, and we've talked about that previously. This is a school chart Dr. Price gave me, and I very much appreciate it. It gives you a sense. This was the school committee's goal of reaching an average of 22 students per classroom across the district at an elementary level. And you can see where we began in fiscal 12, peaked out in fiscal 13 and 14, and then you can see the very steady, without that one blip, but a very steady decline or decrease over the last several years. That in fiscal 19, based upon my assumption of a 3.65 increase for the schools, we will be down to the point that only 18.3% of the classrooms will not have met that goal. At one point, we're at 53%. I think there's an opportunity, possibly this year, but over the next 2 years, that number will be that every classroom will have met that goal. And this assumes that all of the kindergarten classrooms, the ones that will open in the new kindergarten, will be at 22 a classroom. So we are moving aggressively. This shows a good idea of how the selectmen, partnering with the school committee and the administration and the school leadership, partnering together to achieve a goal which is better for all of us. Kids who are educated better mean adults that are better in our community in terms of what they give back to the community. We're committed to that, and I think we've taken aggressive steps to that. So I thought it was important for you to see how that's working, and our goal in the long term is that a year or so, or a couple of years out, that even that 18.3% will be zero. That's our goal. So new or other ongoing initiatives, we keep on repeating the reduction of average classroom size, but it's really important because it is ongoing. The addition of a licensed mental health professional within the town administration budget to deal with service needs that we're seeing growing in the community that are very, very important. A decrease in caseloads for elementary education support staff. I have some data on that. I didn't include it as a slide. The number of, again, nurses and other support staff in the elementary schools, the number of students they will now need to manage as part of their caseloads will decline when we move the elementary students out of those buildings into a new elementary building, into a new kindergarten building, because now there'll be less students in those buildings. And ultimately, we'll be working to add teachers into those spaces to further reduce classroom size. The Public Employee Committee extension, we're working with them and have tentative agreement to extend that agreement to stay with the GIC for 3 more years. And moving forward with a number of green initiatives that Larry Burzlav is heading up, including the LED retrofit of the town-owned streetlights through grants and other funding sources. So here's what a future looks like. We need and we will are committed to make sure that our senior center will be upgraded and represent the interests, current and future interests of our seniors. We're excited that that's moving forward. We'll have more details to follow, but we're hoping in the next 30 to 45 days to roll out a plan which everyone in the community should appreciate and embrace, and it's an opportunity that I think the seniors will be very excited about. Want to continue OPEB funding. We've been doing that on an ongoing basis. I know that Selectmen and others are involved in an OPEB committee. I'm hoping that OPEB committee over the next 2 years comes up with some creative and interesting opportunities and additional ways to fund OPEB, and we're looking forward to that as we move forward. We're prepared for a second facility master plan. Nothing like success to want more success, and so there's a likely inclusion of additional projects in that plan. The Fire Station 2 will need some additional renovations. That's likely to be the first project. Nothing is yet etched in stone. This is several years from now. Then there's some elementary school upgrades that were identified within a report that was necessary. By the way, on a side burner from all this is the fact that the schools have been working aggressively with the MSBA to get funding for a middle school project. I think whether it's this year or next year or the year after that, that's an essential project to our community to make sure that we upgrade that facility. We may very well, as that moves forward, depending on the timing, look to do all of this work all at once, right? Because it's likely the middle school is going to need a debt exclusion. We should know that. We shouldn't be afraid of the conversation. We have talked about it for many years. All the rest of these projects have been funded within the budget, but some projects, because of their size, may very well require debt exclusions, as the Thompson School did, as purchased of Osgood Hill. So we should be not surprised by the conversation. Ultimately, the voters decide on those things, but we shouldn't. We should be making sure we're communicating what the expectation is as publicly as possible. And finally, we'll need some youth center upgrades. Some of those will be deferred maintenance, although we're doing a pretty good job on those. And some will be driven by a study currently done by the youth center of whether or not new and exciting programs can be added to that space and whether or not the space will need to be modified. And so those are the things we look forward to. The best, most exciting open space project, I think, in the community's history is rolling forward. We have signed design contracts to do the middle school Hay Stadium field project. It's been rolled out to the public over the last year. Chairman Rick Green, members of the group, including Board of Selectmen member Rosemary Schmidt-Daly, has been involved in that. We have community input. It'll be a fantastic project moving forward. We're very excited about that. We would expect that from the design, there'll be a request made to the CPC for Phase 1 of that project. We're hoping as early as the spring, so we could start to see work on the middle schools projects either late in 18 or early in 19. It's possibly a 2 or 3 phase project. It's large. It's 20 acres. But in the end, more of our residents, multi-generational impact on the community, from seniors who can walk around the track or use the fields, to our folks in the schools that surround it, to the rest of us who just like to get out and use open space. So we're very excited about that project, and that's what our future holds. So I'll leave you that with my, I only said one thing that seemed to resonate with myself once, so I keep on repeating it. Just because our current looks better than our past doesn't mean that our future is still not dependent on the decisions we make today. We need to remind ourselves, I remind myself this of every day and every year that we present this. It is essentially important that we appreciate the successes we have, but recognize how we got there, and that to have additional successes, we need to remain focused, not on sometimes the gleeful feeling we have from being in a really good spot, but the challenges we face to get here. Remind ourselves of those things so we can continue moving the community forward. Sorry for a somewhat long presentation, but I stand available to answer any questions you may have.
One question that I have. So our debt service for our excluded debt, how are we looking with that? I know I ask you this all the time, but because I'm always anticipating that we'll say, well, this one's done. So.
The debt service, excluded debt went down, will go down in fiscal 19 from about 1.9 to 600,000. It will go down again, if it's not next year, the year after, to about 300,000, and will remain there through 2023. So I can call up the slide on that, but a substantial portion of the excluded debt is rolling off in fiscal 2019.
Very exciting.
Did I answer the question?
You don't have to pull it up.
No, did you pull it up?
5, I think.
1.842 to 5.9 in fiscal 19. So it's going from 1,842,000 to 590,000 in 19, going to 340,000 in fiscal 20, 334 in 21, 309 in 22, and 309 in 23.
That's great.
With the adjustments from this past year, so looking back at last year's financial forecast, it was actually a bleaker picture. I know that you prefaced your discussion by saying, we look at the deficit for next year, and this year's shows a 1 $109,000 deficit, but last year showed a $398,000 one. So it's not unfair to say that this, even with some additional spending, we're in slightly better shape than we were even going into this successful budget year, or is that?
Yeah, I think, I would say it does appear that way, certainly in the numbers. The Revenue Fixed Cost Review Committee, which is a couple of members of the schools, Dr. Price and Jim Mealy, a couple of members of the Finance Committee, and Lynn Savage, meet together to sort of create that framework and give me a recommendation. There's a couple of revenue sources where they've agreed or recommended that we increase some of the historical numbers because we've been overperforming those numbers for a period of time. So that's part of the delta. We've seen new growth up by 50,000. The motor vehicle excise went up by close to 300,000. So some of those changes in what has been relatively unchanged revenue sources is having a big part of that impact. Separate from that, I plan on producing a budget for you, which at this point I'm expecting for the 7th year in a row not to have water and sewer increases. Can't yet make that commitment, but it's very likely.
Any comments?
That's good, Andrew. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this. Every year.
My pleasure.
A comprehensive report that's always filled with good quotes to live by, right?
And
It's
a nice
theme.
new one from
The
Andrew.
nice new ones. We have any school committee related? I don't know if there was any school questions or other questions.
Thank you. So that was the only item on the agenda for communications and announcements. I know that there was a sizable contingent here this evening eager to hear that, so while they clear the room, I do just want to acknowledge the hard work of one of our town committees. So since our last meeting, the Festival Committee held quite a few different public events. That includes our Santa Parade, where fortunately we had Mother Nature cooperate and I think had record-breaking crowds. We also had a tree lighting where I ended up swinging by the Festival Committee, and they estimated that after that tree lighting, they had 1,000 people on the common in the dark. They handed out 50 gallons of hot chocolate and over 600 cookies. So I said it that night, and I'm going to say it again for folks watching at home. Those events are volunteer run. If you'd like to join, submit an application to the board. You can submit it either through our office online or to Lori Burzlaff, and we'd love to get you involved. They'd love to get you involved. It kind of, the cherry on the Sunday of their entire season was yesterday. They ended up having their Santa breakfast. So again, another packed event where community volunteers put on a great event for people living in the community. So
I'd just like to say we had a wonderful grand marshal this year, and someone who lit the tree, someone who, he's my uncle, so I was really, and I had nothing to do with his pick. But it was really fun. He really enjoyed it. It was fun for the whole family. So.
just cruising along in quite the classy Volvo right there,
yes,
right?
He did. I said, gee, I have a convertible. Can you use it? It was very fun. It was a wonderful event. And those volunteers work so hard so we all can have a great time. They work so we all can have a great time. So thank you again to them. It was really good. That tree lighting was great this year. Just the right amount of activities and not cold. It was really good.
Any other communications or announcements? Members of the board, staff? Hearing none, we can move on to consent items. We have first item on the agenda, the acceptance of a MassWorks grant in the amount of $2.7 million for Route 125 corridor improvements. So folks will remember that during the power outage, we had Secretary Jay Ash come to our town hall and present us with a great little award, but now we have to accept that award, don't we? So, Town Manager Mailer, I don't know if you would like to elaborate. I know that we've had a discussion, but if you'd like to go into greater detail about the work that went into this, or...
I just want to recognize the efforts of Princeton Properties, who was a partner on the grant. They're the ones building the 192 microgrid units along 125, along with the Fagetta folks who are building 43,000 square feet of commercial. So they were great partners, as was the state. Erica Forey did an excellent job in producing the grant application. And you may recall, in addition to the $2.7 million from the Commonwealth, the Princeton Fagetta folks are contributing the soft costs, which is approximately $300,000. So the town will not pay for any portion of the improvements, which really run from the Barker farm stand down to at Butcher Boy on both sides of the roadway.
Yeah, your planning department, led by Erica Foy, really did an unbelievable job. And so special thanks to them.
So that being said, we do have to accept that.
Move
Grant?
that the Board of Selectmen accept the MassWorks grant in the amount of $2.7 million for improvements to Route 125.
Seconded?
Motion made by Selectman Keen, seconded by Selectman Nobley. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So, moving on, bless you. Moving on, we do have before us 2 appointments to the OPEB Advisory Committee. Selectman Nobley, you've been appointed to that and the driving force, so I don't know if you'd like to elaborate.
Sure. Sure. Well, to Town Manager Mailer's comment, we're taking on this mantle of opportunity. We'd like to look at it as an opportunity and a challenge. And this group took us a little while to kind of put the folks all together on it, but it's going to be a group of folks who are really going to look at these obligations and hopefully come up with some ideas and potentially strategies for us as a board and as a community to weigh. And in interviewing folks for this, we wanted to have one citizen as we start out visioning the committee to sit on it, but we ended up having 2 really outstanding individuals apply. And Regina and I sort of, after some consultation with one another, said, you know, we should just have them both because they bring tremendous perspectives. And one is Mark Rogers, and Mark, folks may know Mark. He was chairman of the Finance Committee, has great knowledge of our town, our processes, and really what goes into all the components that make our financial picture work. And then we had the pleasure of Brian Perry interviewing with us. And Brian, he sat on the Board of Assessors here, but he served as an auditor for the city of Lowell. And so he's really been involved in making these kind of evaluations and brings a perspective really from a larger picture and from a professional application. And it just seemed to us that having 2 residents, two citizens of our town sitting on this committee, along with our town accountant and the business manager from the school, representative from the school committee, who would make for a very good balance and blend. And so with that, I asked that we move to appoint Brian Perry and Mark Rogers to the OPEB Advisory Committee so we can get rolling.
I second that.
Motion made by Selectman Nobley, seconded by Selectman Smedili. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. I'd go back to what I said earlier about the festival committee. This is not as fun and definitely a far more consequential task when you think of our town budget. So thank you to these 2 gentlemen for stepping forward and volunteering, and those folks that we have already.
You want to say it?
You can say it. Listen, it helps with
All
recruitment.
of our volunteers in town, they're the lifeblood of the town, and they give us our heart and soul and make us a great place to live, work, play, and learn. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Next item on the agenda, we do have a request from our resident Tom Duggan. He's the editor of the Valley Patriot, editor and owner, and he's requested to use the town common for a menorah display from December 14th until December 21st, and to use the town common on December 14th specifically from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. for the lighting of that menorah. So this is an event that happens every year, probably going back for the past decade.
Mr. Chair, I move approval.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Selectman Smedili, seconded by Selectman Valencourt. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you, Tom, for doing this on the common. So, next item on the agenda, we do have an affordable unit resale at 210 Chickering Road, Unit 204A, which is commonly known as Kittredge Crossing. So this is a right of first refusal. The Citizens Housing Planning Association, also known as CHAPA, has notified our town that the affordable housing unit at this location is being listed for sale, and we can exercise our right of first refusal. Do we hear a motion?
Move approval.
Motion made by Selectman Smedili,
I'll second that.
seconded by Selectman Valencourt. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chair, I motion that we move into licensing.
Motion made by Selectman Smedili to move into licensing. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Seconded by Selectman Nobley. All in favor? Aye. licensing.
Okay, we're in licensing. So this, tonight is our annual renewal of all our establishments and all our licenses. So for those who may not be aware, so we have 65 establishments approximately in town, and we have licensing for alcohol, common victualler, package store, entertainment. There's a number of licenses, and normally we take them all in a batch and approve them all. We get a recommendation from the assistant town manager, assistant town clerk, with respect to payments of the licenses. We get recommendations from the police and fire and building. We have gotten favorable recommendations from all of those to approve the licenses for 2018. What I am going to suggest is we take one license. We have some work, a little bit of work to do with one of our establishments, so I'm going to suggest that we take Rolf's off the table for tonight, and we're going to work with their owners, and we'll bring this one back up in our next meeting. But for tonight, I'd like to recommend we take that off the table for tonight in our approval process.
Would you like a motion to table that?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Chair, motion to table the review of the license at Ralph's Pub on Main Street.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we're back to our approvals for all licenses. We do have a letter that came in on November 15th with respect to one of our licensees, Small Lake Farms. I haven't got a chance to read through it in its entirety because I did just receive it tonight. I know it was submitted on the 15th, but it was in my mailbox, and I did not get it until this evening, so I haven't read through it in great detail. I did skim through it, and I understand the concerns here. And I guess I would look for suggestions on what we would want to do with this. I don't know if the other members of the board have seen this. Okay, so other members of the board have not seen this as well. So I think at this point,
Would you like our clerk to read it into the record?
it's fairly lengthy.
Please.
Well, it's fairly lengthy, so I would think we would not want to do that at this point. I'm not.
Can we move that to like our next meeting and address it in our next meeting? Is that?
We could do that. We could make a copy of this letter for everybody, and
let's
I
do
think
that.
that's a good suggestion,
do
and
that.
take Small Axe at our next meeting as well, and give
Yeah.
people a chance to read through this and read the concerns of the citizen that submitted it, as well as the other neighbors that are signed on it, or at least mentioned in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is actually signed.
At the time this first came up, there was, at the time we were talking about scheduling, we originally thought that the scheduling for the annual renewals would be the 18th. So when I put it in the inbox and made it, I thought there was going to be sufficient time from when we got it for everybody to get it.
Right, sure.
We're moving faster than we historically have moved, which is
Okay.
a good thing, I guess.
So let's,
We're
do we
really
have
moving
a...
things now, so.
Do we have a motion to table Small Axe licensing, entertainment license as well? and
Mr.
liquor
Chairman, I
license?
motion to table the application for license renewal from Small Ag Farms until our next meeting.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll table that. Now we're back to the bulk of the licenses, which covers, again, all of our alcohol, common victualler, function hall facility licenses, with the exclusion of those two that we just discussed. Again, we have favorable recommendations from building, from fire, and from police. So normally we would take this in as a batch and approve them all at once, unless there are anybody that wants to separate any out. If not, I would suggest that we take a motion to approve them in total.
I just have a question about Jade that isn't open. Did we already approve that? Because I was thinking that we didn't, that we had tabled that because of an issue, but maybe I'm
No,
wrong.
as I recall, we had Jade in front of us. I don't think we tabled it. I thought we did approve it.
We did.
Okay.
Lori, do
the one
you
by
remember?
the
I believe we
right?
did
Yeah.
approve that one, yeah.
We did? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was way back in August, though.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah, long.
And I'm not sure what their opening date is, but they're looking like they're getting close.
Oh, you're right. We did hear it.
Yeah.
I'm misremembering.
Okay, so I will hear a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move that the Board of Selectmen acting as licensing commissioners approve and renew the licenses for all of the establishments listed in the Assistant Town Clerk's memorandum dated December 4th, 2017, taking into account the tabled applicants voted on earlier this evening.
Perfect. We have a
Second.
motion, and we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I'll declare that a unanimous vote. Next on the agenda, we have a request from the China Blossom Restaurant to allow for extended hours on New Year's Eve. They would like to be able to, I believe, stay open until 1 a.m. And that is a common practice that we do every year. We do allow those who request, most of them, to stay open. This year, we only have one on the agenda. So I guess I will hear a motion.
Just to clarify, it was to stay open until 2 and serve alcohol.
Okay, thank you. I was desperately looking for my notes here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the request is to stay, thank you. The request is to stay open till 2 a.m. with the service of alcohol to end at 1 a.m. on New Year's Eve. As of this date, the following business seeking permission to remain open till 2 a.m. I believe that is the common practice that we have for those establishments that requested, and at this point, only one has requested it this year.
In past practice, this has been a particular business that does apply every year and has never had a problem either,
Agreed.
unless they've omitted that from the agenda. I don't recall ever having this business before us for any type of violation.
Not
So-
in recent memory.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Selectmen acting as licensing commissioners approve the request of China Blossom, 946 Osgood Street, to remain open until 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve, with alcohol service to end at 1 a.m.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. I'll have a motion to move out of licensing.
Mr. Chair, motion to move out of licensing.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're back to
You're
the
back.
general meeting.
So we have no old business before this evening's meeting. We have no new business. So I will open it up to public comment. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak to us here this evening. Sir, all I ask is that when you approach the podium, you clearly state your name into the microphone and your address, please.
Reagan EC 1939 Great Pond Road. I'm a little confused about the agenda. It says here when you went into executive session, you went in to consider the value of real property at 1600 Osgood Street. It's my understanding that the assessors are in charge of valuing all real property and personal property in the town. So could you maybe just enlighten me on that a little?
You continue to read on the agenda. There was an agenda posted and then restated and reposted several days ago. The exact title under that item was Executive Session, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 2, Subsection A, 21, Subsection A, Reason Number 6, to consider the value of real property, hyphen, 1600 Osgood Street, proposed marijuana siting agreement. So the agenda was posted and reposted a couple hours later with that description in there. That's the publicly posted agenda.
But I don't understand it. Does this, am I to understand that the Board of Selectmen is going to put a value on the property?
You to understand that under that exemption, which is identified by the Attorney General, the board was having a conversation regarding a proposed marijuana siting agreement and how that may affect value. I have to be cautious about what I reveal, but that's the statutory reference for having the discussion that appears after that. 1600 Osgood Street, proposed marijuana siting agreement.
Has an IGR been issued by the Department of Revenue yet
For,
for valuation of,
it doesn't have to do with assessed valuation. That's not the category in which the AG identified our use of this particular provision. So it doesn't have to do with the assessed value. It's a conversation of value that relates to the 1600 Osgood Street proposed marijuana siting agreement.
okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aganisi.
Could I make one other comment? I'm sorry. Very brief. It was hard to look at the screen. I think if you shut that bank of lights
Oh, I
off.
should have shut the lights off, you're right.
Yeah, it might-
That'll be posted
might help.
on the town's website if anybody wants to, but it's a great point. I should have shut the lights off. Fair point.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Seawade. I own the property at 615 Mass Avenue, as well as the property on 287 Chickering Road. And I'm coming in front of the Selectmen because we have met with the state, and we are very unhappy with their proposal, as well as the safety of the students and the kids that are going to be walking on their plan, as well as the fact that in the creation of the plan, they are breaking...
I'm sure you didn't reference the plan that you're talking about.
Oh, the Mass DOT, Mass Avenue, Chickering Road expansion property, as well as the fact that they have not looked at the recommendations that were given to them over the past 9 years. There has been little communication from the state to the abutters in the first planning process. So we did not receive letters last October as far as them planning to even do this project. In April, we received letters to show up at the Stevens Memorial Library, where I showed them pictures. I live on that corner, have lived there for 40 years, well, even longer, 57 years. And in every 10 minutes, 20 cars run through that red light. Our police officers are not there ticketing. The proposal has said to put in lights that ticket. We have met with the town officials. On the town engineer, he said it has to be a bylaw change to get the lights to work to ticket. So we're expanding an intersection. At that April meeting, the state chief engineer, Larry Cash, looked at me and said, "What are you talking about, a daycare in the church?" I said, "Well, you're talking to the town. Who have you spoken to? You didn't know there was a daycare in that church where 80 kids go there every single day? And you're going to expand to 3 lanes and a 4th lane right there?" I don't think that the state is looking at it. It's labeling it as a safety expansion, but it is going to cause more accidents, people running through that light, 3 lanes going up Mass Ave. So right now, 2 lanes drag Mass Ave right by my house. At 4:30 at night, 7 cars will run that red light. The accidents are happening because of the running of the lights. So we haven't looked at fixing that. We're looking at expanding it. On top of it, with the expansion, I don't think you're looking at the town common. I go out that way because I can't get out my driveway to the left because of the fact that people who are running that light will not let you out. So I go out. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of every single week. There are people now backed up from before the light at Mass Ave going towards the old center to that circle. So now the people are backed up because your roundabout at the old center can't handle the amount of traffic. But yet the state wants to expand that intersection. On top of it, if they don't want to wait for that circle, they now take a right, go to where that little old schoolhouse is on the town common, and they bang a left. Not even stopping for the stop sign. I see it every single day because I go out that way. So what we're proposing is we'd like to sit down and find out what your thoughts are, as well as the fact that on the expansion plans, the state has lied to us. The state person that came out from Ork told me that I could put trees on my easement. The state engineer said to me, "You can't plant there, we're putting a ditch." A ditch going into wetlands that they haven't even looked at where it's really going. So we don't think the project has really been looked at from a town perspective by all the boards coming together. The other thing too, this is Karen who lives on Mass Ave, and on a residential road, there is supposed to be at least, how many feet?
30 feet on a residential, but on...
Only so that we can accurately reflect minutes.
Yes.
If you're going to speak, it's a statement of your name and your address, please.
My name is Karen Loro. I live at 591 Massachusetts Avenue. I'm an engineer who works in artificial intelligence, and I have done projects in traffic forensics and driver behavior, and I was concerned and requested that the state go back and look at what is currently proposed and see how what is proposed impacts injury and death. because everything I knew at that point in time indicated what they were doing was going to increase injury and death. And they were selling it as a safety project. I asked them to do that. That was November 15th, and they said they would. And I specifically requested feedback because I thought it was unlikely they'll come back with something that is positive. Since they didn't come back, I went back and did my research. It's been a number of years since I worked in traffic. And indeed, it's been known since the 70s, exactly the types of things they're doing. So in that road is natural traffic calming. Not enough, but there is some, and they're removing all of that. And it has been demonstrated for nearly 30 years, and it's been in the federal, all the handbooks that on traffic engineering state these are not what you want to do on a collector road such as Mass Ave. So, you know, that's another concern. And there's a number of indicators that they knowingly misrepresented things, and they, so we can get into those topics.
Mr. Manager,
Yep.
or perhaps you might know because
Yeah.
you've been attending the meetings. So we're going to make some changes at the Atkinson, the preschool, and the kindergarten. Don't you think this all should be done at the same time? Because we're going to probably have some changes in traffic patterns.
The work that'll be done on the kindergarten will be a traffic signal eventually, and that'll be done as a function of a permit to the state. So it's a state highway, so as they know, Mass Ave and 125 are state highways. The change on the
Mass
prop...
Ave is not a state
I was going to
highway.
ask.
Well, but the entire intersection, from the intersection back in certain directions of Mass Ave is considered state. So even on state highways, you don't just begin at the corner of Mass Ave. They own, that's part of the reason why that project extends down Mass Ave, is because they own within so many feet of the intersection. So
But-
the entire stretch is in.
That's not what the state project manager is stating. He's actually stating that the town owns it, the town made the decision whether or not that additional lane would be put there.
But let's put things in, just to clarify things. The conversations you've had with the state, including the prospect of easements and otherwise, have not come from the town. The state can't take town-owned land. So I just want to clarify who's managing this project. It's a state
Andrew,
function
I don't mean to stop you,
Yeah.
but when we asked the state engineer, she said the town made the decision.
No,
Chris-
here's very specifically what the town decided, so we can be clear. So two things. One, I have a question I'll ask at the end, which is simply, you've raised all the reasons why the state's doing it as if it's nefarious, and I want to be a little cautious of that, because I'd like to understand why the state would be coming into a project to add the possibility of risk. So bear with me one second. Hold that one second.
Okay.
Okay? Why the state would come in to do a project, because it sounds a little bit like it's planned to make it so bear with me. As it relates to that, what the town involved itself was the following. The state had produced probably 25% plans, sidewalks on both sides of the roadway, some action back down Mass Ave in both directions, but primarily from where you two live going back toward the school. They came forward with a plan which was about 25% development drawings, and came back with one question about the right turn lane onto 125. And they indicated that through what they call their warrants, which is the baseline for which they make safety decisions and otherwise, complying with federal standards in terms of roadway safety, those are called the warrants, they indicated that a right turn lane reduced the risk of property. But I'm communicating to you what they've indicated.
You're talking about a right turn lane
Right,
going
but-
up Mass Avenue?
A right turn lane from Mass Avenue onto 125 heading toward Merrimack. So where you live, right? And with that, they simply,
yeah.
I'm just trying to narrow
Okay.
the question. What they asked, that they said to the town was, if we go back, if we create this lane and you go back, I don't have the number of feet, but you know what I'm talking about, past your homes,
Yeah.
that reduces the risk of safety, risk of accident. Would you support that if we say that this is the case? Well, of course, the town's response to reducing the risk of accident was yes. As it relates to the entire project, that is a state-managed project where there was some public interaction with the state officials. I know you three folks privately met with the state officials in addition to myself to help coordinate that. So I come back a little bit to, that I would need to understand why the state would be going through an effort to improve an intersection that we didn't particularly ask for, if it's not to address what they have in terms of data, in terms of an inordinate number of accidents. Why would they be spending the money?
Okay.
Yes.
The engineer stated it was to improve the throughput on the highway. So it was less, because we talked about different mechanisms in which you could improve safety.
Right.
And she, basically, if you slow things down, people have been asking to make that a larger school section, a school zone.
Zone, right. Yeah.
So, because there are 4 schools on one side and all the children on the other side walking across.
Yeah.
And so there's the auto ticketing technology that would have to get a waiver.
We are, I can just tell you from our perspective, I just want to separate that piece. We are not, I want to be clear. I will not be recommending to this board that we're putting automatic ticketing or stoplight cameras that cameras around the community. We're just not going to do it. I would, if it comes off what I would call bricks and mortar enforcement through patrols, I'm supportive. There's legal challenges associated with that. Quite frankly, there's national accident data that when folks see the sign as they're crossing the yellow light, they slam on their brakes not to get a ticket, and more accidents are caused by automatic tracking data, automatic signals nationally than are avoided, and that's real data. So I just want to set that one aside. If we have an enforcement question, we'll talk about the enforcement, but it's been brought up a couple
Okay.
times, and I want to set that piece aside. We're not doing that.
Okay, but not necessarily having them, there's different types of trafficking signals that just
understand.
tag
We're
cars.
not, I would not be recommending to this board, first of all, that signal is not ours, it's the state's, but I would not be recommending to the board automatic ticketing or automatic traffic violation enforcement through signals. There's questions of privacy that I do not think the board wants to go to. I've been involved in this conversation. I understand the benefit, and it does exist somewhere. There's questions of privacy, what information you're capturing, where it's stored. There's questions about enforcement. There's questions about whether the liability has been increased. And that's a state traffic signal. And I think that's, if the state wants to enforce it, they would still need a local bylaw from us, because you can't do this without a local bylaw, a traffic enforcement bylaw. I just am not prepared to tell you that that's a path that I would recommend.
So can I just make a comment? Can I make a comment,
Excuse me,
please?
let's, Karen, if we could, excuse me, if we could allow, if we could allow Selectman Davenport to speak.
One question I have is, I know, I don't remember the time frame, but a while ago, we had a proposal in front of us for this project. It was high level, I think, wasn't as detailed. Can we get the state back in here to give us, because I feel like I'm at a disadvantage.
Yes.
These folks have
I
already
agree.
obviously done a lot of work and a lot of background. Okay, I'm not done yet, but thank you. They've obviously done a lot of work,
Yes.
and I feel that I'm at a disadvantage because I haven't seen the final plans yet, or the proposed plans, and what it is they want to do. I would like to
Fair
see
question.
that. I'd like to see if we can get a representative from the state in here to answer some of our questions as well, because again, I think, obviously these guys have done some work, and we need to get up to that same level so we can understand what it is.
And this is
Now,
helpful,
to the extent
because-
of what we can do about it, that's another question,
Well,
but we can certainly.
I think we could, I think it goes to the question I asked. The state has indicated that this is not about making it easier on cars. It's about making the intersections safer. It's I'm just,
Ms. Karen, if,
it is what they've stated to me. That's all. I only can convey what they've stated to me. That's why they're including sidewalks on pretty extensive routes up and down 125, because they're concerned about pedestrians. So I appreciate what you've said, because it helps me understand how it's being viewed on your side and what you may have been communicated to the state. But to date, what has been communicated is it is a opportunity to decrease the number of accidents in that intersection, because they say that there is a fair amount of them. So it's a fair baseline to bring them in and ask that. If it's simply about vehicular speed and throughput, then but I think the board and I may have a different perspective about some of their views on that. It doesn't mean some of it shouldn't be that, but if that is the baseline of it, I think it'd be interesting to see the response to that.
so Andrew, if, one moment, Karen, please. So if we were to ask the state to come and give a presentation, and just give us a general update, because it is true, I mean, there's a lot of different moving pieces to this intersection and the residents being impacted. Would there be an opportunity for residents at that meeting to engage the state, or how would such be structured? Because I'd like to give these 3 residents some direction leaving here, because I think that we could talk quite at length this evening, but probably not get very far. Whereas,
Well, you have two routes, right? So one route, I think that if you open to a general public meeting and put it in your agenda, that becomes a little more complicated. So the question is, do you have a meeting, have another resident meeting or a resident meeting on the topic, have the state president, have one or more of you present, and then have that sort of reported back? Or do you decide that you're going to invite more folks and have that entire conversation on one of your agendas? It just depends which direction you go.
There are additional residents that live on Archer Ave, Green Street, that are very concerned about the kids' safety. We have been approached by different family members, mothers, who do not even live near the intersection, but their kids are going to Atkinson, and they're crossing that street. When we met with the state in April, the crossing guard, the little guy that said to them, he fears for his life. They looked at him like, who cares? They're not listening to the safety. They're not listening to, now there's going to be, right where that crossing guard is, there's going to go from one lane, starting to go into 2 lanes, and ending up in 3 lanes. They're also taking away his driveway, no access to his house.
Can I say something?
you if you could say your name and address, please.
My name is Jonathan Park, and I live in 595 Mass Avenue, which is sitting on the right at the corner of Chickering Road and the Mass Avenue. And we're talking about the safety issues. I have 2 children. One goes to Atkins, one goes to North Andover Middle School. And my daughter walks, literally cross from my house through the church, use that sidewalk on the left side, go to school. My son actually going to the Atkinson on the left side of it, so he's okay. But with this expansion of the road, they are literally taking half of my driveway, which is the only access or entrance to my driveway. Without the current driveway that I have no way to make the car out of my house during the in and out of the daily life. I mean, if one of you, I'm basically asking, one of you just stop by my house.
It's the
I've been
brown,
there.
the
Yep.
brown house?
No,
It's a red house.
The red house.
With the guardrail on the corner.
No, I know.
I've been there.
Yeah, that's, whoa.
So if you do construction for next 2 years, I have 2 kids in which they have a lot of after-school activities. My wife cannot get out of the house around 5 o'clock if my daughter has any lessons. We can't. Stephanie mentioned about the making left turn. There's no way that I'm making left turn from my house. I have to make the right turn, but sometimes they literally stop at my front of my house.
You can't make the left turn. That is just.
And
that
if
is
you
a
make
tough
that 3
turn.
lane on the one side, right now, sometimes I could do it because there are some people, nice people, to stop and let me go. But if you make it 3 lane, there's no way that I'm going to make a left turn from there. And not only about the safety issues, I have a sunroom right next to towards the Chickering Road, and I used to work at home, and over 5 years. I kid you not, every week, at least one time, there's a major accident, and I witness it from my window. I even have a photo that actually, this is like in middle of the afternoon, around 3 o'clock, where the kids get out of school. A vehicle actually came into my property because they were trying to avoid the traffic. And with this new driveway and with no barriers, I'm basically open to highway or whatever the street that you have open. This is unsafe for my family and my kids.
Okay, so at this point, again, we've had Selectmen, I was fortunate enough to hear the engineer, but I think I completely agree with the Selectman Valencourt that you certainly need more information, and I don't know that anything, but one moment.
No, they're all going to see the proposal. I'm just suggesting that if you put 20, 25 people in a room, this setting isn't as conducive. So
To a productive
they're clearly all going to see
discussion.
the proposal. So I'd suggest that we'll arrange that meeting, call whoever you want to the meeting, and then from that meeting, come back here if there's been some progress and change. It sounds to me a little bit like there's a general disagreement that the process should have happened at all.
Mr. Mayor, we had this kind of meeting a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Right, and nothing happened.
Nothing happened. They said to us the town is
Stop.
Okay, one moment.
Hold on. You had a meeting with engineering staff. It's not, this is a, you mean the meeting with the engineering staff?
Yes.
I just want to set a couple of
From the
things.
state.
I understand, but I want to put a couple of things in order. We certainly can influence that, and I'm not saying we can't. But this is a state project. What I offered was sitting with, is getting the state officials to meet with you three folks with our engineering staff. And that happened.
We did.
I understand.
Okay.
It was also, I understand you met. I understand you met for close to 3 hours. I understand. It also, and I don't know what's changed from that conversation. And in fairness, and I appreciate all the research you did, it's December 4th, and you were talking about a mid-November meeting with maybe a holiday in between. I think it's possible, I'm not saying it has, it's possible that you haven't yet received feedback you may have gotten from the state. I still don't probably think, based on your action, that that's going to be enough. I'm being fair about that. But I wouldn't expect that the state has not responded. Expect to a certain extent that 3 weeks in the middle of a holiday is probably why you haven't heard some of it, okay? So I would still suggest that we do that again, because I don't know what else you want me to offer. I'm suggesting that I'll attend a meeting, bring the state here with and listen to the folks. But I do think some of the things you said were heard. You just haven't heard back yet, because that meeting was in mid-November. Phil, you attended?
I also think.
Mid-November, and they
Where
haven't
was
had a
that
chance to
meeting?
do
Where
that.
was it
It was in the
advertised?
DPW office. But
Right.
I also think,
It was
I think that Board of
the
Selectmen
one
have
sec.
to be educated on the fact that our notices, some get notices, some don't. They said, the state said to us, oh, we sent out the notices certified. This is my notice.
Yeah, me
Do you see certified on there?
Yep. So I think that this, so let's, I know you didn't, so let's, again, the select board is operating at a disadvantage, Karen, so we're going to,
Yes.
we're going to resolve this by saying that.
I just think it's best that we
Greg,
put everybody
the-
in.
That's fine.
And here's what I'll do. Just
Karen-
here's-
Karen,
hold on.
one
If I
moment,
can,
please.
'cause I
Can we
think
let the
I'm
town
addressing
manager
your
speak?
question. First of all, everything that happened in the public meeting that was held in this development is in a 100-page transcribed document. And I only say that because I don't want the public to think this was done in a closet somewhere. The state officials called a meeting. They had it in a public location. It was advertised by this particular board, and there is a full transcription. And that transcription is made available to everybody who lives in the neighborhood. So if you want to read what was said, just so you know, I would suggest that if we have that alternative meeting, we can send a robocall to the entire neighborhood. Right? Might be the easiest way to do it. Because it's not going to be, because again, I'm going to ask the state, it's probably not going to be registered letters from the state, right? We'll send a robocall to the entire neighborhood so more people are included. Social media, do the normal thing, and have a meeting with that. I'll give a copy of the board of the proposal, so they have it in the meantime. And then you'll be able to provide feedback to that, and then come back to the selectmen, invite the state again with, you certainly can attend that anytime you want, and have the state engineer, whoever it is, report what the project does, answer the board's questions, and include any other things that came up as a function of that.
Okay.
That sound okay?
I would request the zone.
Can I? I've saw your emails, but I know you were, but I just want to move, zoning is completely irrelevant, because the state is exempt from zoning. We don't have.
Karen.
That's fine.
Karen, at this point, I think, again, we want to talk about,
We're just going to make one point.
I will let you make your final point.
Okay. When you look at the plans, see that there are Jersey barriers in front of the entire project, except in front of his house
Okay.
and my house?
During the construction, you mean?
Yes.
Or
Okay,
after.
along the entire way. But where they're coming in so close to the house, they cannot even put Jersey barriers to protect our house.
Yep.
That's
And I'm
important.
here.
That is 10 feet or less. They're going to be working from my house.
It's a fair
and
point.
His house.
So the conversation hasn't ended. What I'm
Okay.
encouraging you is to create a setting to take into consideration your concerns. Make sure to do it, if that meeting lasts 2 hours, it lasts 2 meetings. 2 hours, that's what it lasts. And to address the kinds of concerns you have, and then come back to the board, now that the board has a chance to look at the plans, and you've had a point to express those, which in that kind of setting is a little better, and bring all of that back to the board to see what the next steps are. Okay?
I would also
May I
Wait,
just
one
make a
moment.
suggestion too, that not only the neighborhood, but I think you should also be informing the entire Atkinson school, because those parents are going in and
So
out,
we're-
as well as the preschool at the church, the date.
In the middle school.
And the middle school.
In the middle school, because they're walking to the middle school. And the other thing too
what-
is that in their plans, and I don't know if Phil has conveyed this to Andrew, or you heard the notes, Andrew, that right turn on Red, that they're taking the corner, they're putting a yield sign.
Okay, so we're getting again back into the
Yeah.
details of the project, which is not fair to this board. One moment, Mr. I think at this point, the town manager laid out a clear case,
This project is
and
more than 15 months away from anything happening. So anybody that feels that a 3-week period, this is supposed to any caution we have, nothing's happening tomorrow. Nothing's happening in the spring of 18. Nothing's happening in the summer of 18. The state moves, if we're slow, the state's really slow. And so we have time to do this. It doesn't mean we're not going to focus on it right away, but nothing's happening to your home or the intersection within any short period of time.
so to make sure that there's resolution to this meeting, we're going to request that the state put together a meeting for residents.
Yep.
We'll robocall residents, and then we'll take the suggestion about including parents. I mean, of course, that meeting would be publicized anyways. It'd be a public meeting, so we could...
Hold a public meeting, advertising? Yeah,
Absolutely. So make every effort to inform anybody that'd be impacted, and then, based on the results of that meeting, we'll follow up with a public meeting here with the Board of Selectmen, where they come and give an explanation
We'll
of
let
what
the
that
state give an
project
update,
looks
and
like.
anybody else is welcome to come back to that meeting and provide further comment.
Perfect.
Charge in terms of organizing the meeting?
I'm not organizing, I'm going to call a meeting. I'm going to send a robocall to everybody within a circle radius, fairly large circle radius of your neighborhood. You should get that call, because you should be automatically on the system to get that call. It'll be a posted public meeting. You can always call my office and ask, when's that meeting going to be? I have to find out when the state officials are going to be present. Don't be surprised, again, given it's December, that could be early January.
That's
I'm
fine.
hoping it's not, but it could be early January to do that. And then as a function of that meeting, then we'll provide feedback or have the state official come here and update the board as to what they heard and what the feedback is relative to that meeting.
You might actually want to consider, speaking of state officials, is call your state representatives.
I've already contacted Representative DeZoglio. She's going to be meeting with us.
Okay. Thank you, folks.
Yeah, one thing
Okay.
they did say, if it reached 100% design, they couldn't change it. So that-
And it's already
So-
75% design on the website.
That's
Okay.
what they stated.
That's, I mean, we're taking into consideration for the holiday season, that again, it sounds like you're going to move as quickly as you can, given the
Okay.
schedule that
Thank you for
we
your
can control.
time.
Thank you, all three of you, for coming this evening. Any other public comment?
Hi, good evening.
Sir, if you wouldn't mind.
Christopher Spanks. I work for the North Andover DPW, 384 Osgood Street. I'm being subjected to a hostile work environment at the DPW. I feel my immediate supervisors and human resources are not taking my accusations seriously. Therefore, I have no recourse but to approach this board, whom ultimately are my superiors' bosses. I honestly believe when a person of my physical size states that they are in fear for their personal safety, it's a red flag. I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I feel that Jim Sanford and Tim Willett need a refresher course on dealing with this diagnosis.
Mr. Spinks, if you wouldn't mind.
I have been out of work since October 23rd.
Okay.
Karen Robinson has been helpful to me. Kathy Darby is a completely different story. When she did finally contact me last week,
Mr. Spanks?
she felt her sickness and absence from work was more pressing than my predicament.
Mr. Spanks?
I have specifically stayed away from work so the investigation would not be compromised and out of fear. I was led to believe that these types of accusations are thoroughly and timely investigated.
Mr. Spinks, may I interrupt you?
appears-
Mr. Spinks, may I
Chris,
interrupt you for a moment,
it
please, so I can ask a
appears
question?
approximately 6 weeks now.
Mr. Spinks.
I feel that I am being
Mr.
feeling
is this-
untreated for another worker's violence. I feel the financial hardship put upon my family is unjust, and I deserve much better.
Question for,
I have no response, and I recommend the board does not respond.
thank you, Mr. Spinks.
That's it?
Spanks, you...
I've given this town 30 years. You can't even give me some type of...
Yes, there is a place and time to
You
have...
can call me Chris, too. You don't have to call me Mr. Spanks.
There's a place and time, Mr. Spanks, to have this conversation.
You can call me Chris. You don't have to call me Mr. Spanks.
Chris, I've known you for the time I've been here, and we've always had a positive relationship. I felt we have. But there's a place and time to have this conversation, and it is not here.
Well, then where is it?
It's any place you would have, I'm not going to go back and forth with you on a matter that's a personnel matter. In a
I'm not
public session.
getting any resolve from the DPW. What other recourse do I have? I'm asking you for advice.
And
You're my employer. Isn't that part of what...
I'm not going to respond because I think you were giving it some advice. I'm just going to leave it at that, Mr. Spanks. My office is open every day. You've never approached me about the circumstance. You've never come to me in this setting. Quite frankly, they're not your bosses. I am, and I take that very seriously. I take your accusations very seriously. But there's a time and place to have that conversation, and this isn't it.
I do believe that they're your bosses.
I didn't say
You
they were
have
my
checks
bosses.
and balances.
No,
You're not the king.
Mr. Spanks, they are clearly my bosses. I'm not confused about that. I'm saying I'm your boss.
And neither am I confused.
Right. And so all I'm saying is there's a time and place to have this conversation, and this is not the appropriate time and place.
Well, I disagree. And it's not the right way to run a department or a town. I apologize if I may have, Rosemary, I'm sorry, Dickie, the new members, but you've got to listen to this. People have to hear what's going on.
Any other public comment? Mr. Rand.
Excuse me, must have been a fun.
I assure you, I will be much quiet. Chris is a friend of mine. I'd like to talk to you about a memorial.
You've spoken before us before.
I
Yes.
live at 280 Dale Street.
Thank you.
Some years ago, I came before the Board of Selectmen, and I asked permission to make a memorial for a young man that died in Vietnam. I wanted a little intersection, a little island at the intersection of Osgood Street and of Osgood Street and Academy Road. At that time, the Board of Selectmen asked me if I would get together with the Veterans Agent and determine how many men lost their lives in Vietnam. And so I did that, and we came up with the name of 6 young men. We then sat down and we raised $52,000 to build a memorial for those 6 young men. We came back before the board, and Ms. Medill, because of what you advised us, we put the memorial at the North Andover High School. That was your suggestion. Our hope was that the students in North Andover High School would appreciate the fact that these young men had died so that they could enjoy that high school. Since that time, the memorial has been damaged 4 times that I know of. The first time it was damaged, there are decals at the end of each man's name, and somewhere in this town there's an iPad, and if you press that iPad on that decal, it gives you a history of those 6 young men. I don't know where it is today, but those were the first damage that was done with the decals. We fixed that. The next was a motorist backed into the benches and knocked one of them over, and we fixed that. And then there were 2 occasions when the people plowing snow ran over the benches and damaged them, and we fixed that. And now I came back before you and asked if we could once and for all fix the problem of the destruction of that memorial. And what was decided was that the benches would be moved back. That memorial was designed by the architect that designed North Andover High School. He did that for us for nothing. The designation and the design of that memorial was given to us in a blueprint. After we raised the $50,000 to build, to buy the benches in the stone for the memorial, we then had to put it all together. And I did that. I did that with my son. My son Jeff came to me and said, "I'd like to help you with that, Dad." And so we built that memorial. So the memorial means a great deal to me. And Mr. Chairman, I called you and asked you to go and look at the terrible conditions that existed at that memorial just a few weeks ago.
And I don't know what it used to look like, so I agree. I don't know what, you had said to drive by it, and I did.
Well,
And that you would come before us.
The last time I went up, the flags were all tattered and torn. And for some years, I took care of those flags when Ed was in charge. But because of health reasons in my own family, I had to give that up. And that situation has changed. So now I have time to devote back to that memorial. And I would like to see that memorial, once and all, be put in a condition where it doesn't get damaged. And what I would like to do, I would like to take up the pavers that are there, because when the last construction to the memorial was done, they just went out and found a couple of pavers and put them in, and they don't even match what's there. They took the benches that we had put as instructed by the architect inside the circular area sitting around near the base of the flagpole. The benches now are on the outside of that. And they tore out a couple of shrubbery and they put them in between. Given the fact that the shrubberies aren't being cared for, very rapidly the shrubberies would grow and the benches would be completely obstructed. I asked before that the shrubbery be removed and that the benches be put inside this oval that surrounds the flagpole like it was originally designed. And that 2 small stone walls be erected where the shrubbery are. Several times over the years, the people that mowed the lawns at the high school would simply blow the clippings back over the memorial. And I have to go up with a broom and brush them all off. There are 3 lights at the memorial. Only 2 of them are working. Dougie Small, so Small Electric here in North Andover. His brother-in-law was Mike Byron, whose name appears on that wall. And so Dougie has been very helpful to us through the years in making sure those lights are working properly. Right now, as of this night, there are only 1 light that's working properly. I thought that I could probably get a sum of money from the Community Preservation Act, and so I went in to speak to them, and they advised me that no, you could not use preservation money for that memorial, but they said we will set aside a sum of money this year to repair the memorial. In the spring, I talked to the veterans officer at that time, Jerry McGuire, and I told Jerry that I knew he was quite busy and that I would be willing to help in that effort if he wanted me to, and he said that would be a help to him. So I went to the DPW and introduced myself, and I told them that I would be happy to sit down with them anytime they wanted and come up with a solution to the problem at that memorial. I understand that it took until October to get the town meeting warrant approved, so the money would not have been available before October. But I assume that because it is past that time, that it's probably available now. And I would like desperately to put that memorial back in its proper condition and see if we can't get it to me. For once and for all, to be clean and neat as it should be.
I'm sorry that I don't have a working memory. So you're saying that the money was already approved for this, or?
I'm not aware money was approved, but I am aware of all Mr. Rand's points are all valid. I think one of the only, and the monument needs to be put back. I think the challenge, this isn't intended to be a but maybe some feedback, is that we need to try to, I'm laughing at the fact that we do have the tendency to push snow. It's in a spot where we push snow, and it ends up impacting monuments. So we just have to figure out what we need to do with it. It's balusters or something else. We're going to need to surround it because we want to put it back where it belongs and to repair. And I do think when they moved the benches, they did that. They fixed the benches, did those things. But it isn't the way it was originally intended to be. Is that we need to put some balls because if you imagine as that parking lot gets plowed and we get a foot or two of snow, as things start to move in that direction, they sort of lose sight of the benches and other things, and things get pushed. So we have to make sure we do something so that when we fix it permanently, and we should, the town should do that, and we'll work with Mr. Rand to find a way to do that. The first step we need to do is make sure that we put some kind of, I'm saying bollards, some kind of protection around it. So when,
kind of like a
I think it's going to need to be,
More than that.
it's going to be a little beefier, maybe granite posts. So the question would be what's appropriate and doesn't take away from the monument. Something so that when we start to plow snow, we're just not creating the problem again, because it has been an ongoing problem. But I know we've been here in the past and we've done some things to help improve, and it needs to be fixed, or it needs to be put back the way it was and restored and make sure that it's protected so we're not doing this.
In the short term, we could address, you said the lights are out. 2 of the 3 lights are out.
I beg your pardon?
Did I misunderstand? 2 of the 3 lights are out, you said, over at that monument?
Yeah, only one working light, only one of the lights are now
There's only
functioning.
one light that's working now, the other two are.
Are those are relatively
Yeah,
easy
I
fixes
think-
that we could address?
Let me start with the schools, just because of where it's located, and Jim Stanford, and see if we can come up with, and we'll run it by Mr. Rand, some way of installing first. But I'll say, I'm referring to as concrete bollards, but something that's appropriate, but at the same time, the plow's going to know when it hits it, and it's not going to continue to cause the same problem, because it does happen often. Then we can move the benches back to where the original intention was. I know that in talking with Bruce in the past, I thought that he had worked on the shrubs and related items, but I don't know if that's not the case. And I know we've talked about the pavers on the interior, and as I understood it, the pavers had been, in fact, we spent several $1,000s making sure that any misplaced or displaced pavers were put back appropriately. But I know there was also a suggestion, you may have made it, Mr. Rand, I'm not sure, that the pavers be replaced with a different product than was originally installed. I think I recall that. I'm not
What
sure.
I would like to do in
Yes.
that area, I'm on the cemetery board of directors at the Ridgewood Cemetery, and you all understand that we've been doing a tremendous amount of work up there. And we have made sure that everything that's put into that cemetery with the money donated by the town is put in to last forever. And on that frame, we use granite. And as I spoke to the men who installed that granite, I found out that that's probably the way that we should go with this memorial. And I spent some time this summer down in Gloucester, and if you've ever been to Gloucester, there is magnificent memorials to those individuals who lost their lives at sea. And they're pavers, they're granite pavers that they then inscribe with the names of the individuals who have been lost at sea. And I would like to do the same thing at the memorial at the high school. I would like to put down granite pavers, and I would like to inscribe the names of all of the men and women from the town of North Andover who went to war during the Vietnam crisis. I'm sure you all understand how much of a horrible situation that was during that time frame. But these men and women were treated so badly when they came home from war. They weren't treated like heroes. They weren't anybody saying, support your troops.
You're right, Mr. Rand.
These
That
men-
memorial was created
but
for the
those
reason that
men-
they were forgotten.
Yes, they
The
were.
town
Those men
finally
and women were
stepped up.
spat upon. They were chastised far beyond what any group of veterans has ever been punished before. And it's not proper. And it's not proper for those men who gave their lives so that we can be here tonight. And so I would like to see an area of granite pavers put down, and that the names of every man and woman who wants their name inscribed on that memorial be put there. And I would love to see the high school doing something in honor of those veterans, maybe at Memorial Day, or maybe at Veterans Day, just to show their thanks to those 6 young men who died for this country. And I will be happy to cooperate with any member of your organization in town that wishes to accomplish that.
I'm
Thank
going
you.
to suggest, sorry, Mr. Rand, I'm going to suggest that I put this on the Veteran Service Agent for now, Veteran Service Officer, for him to coordinate, because that kind of initiative would require, obviously, his resources, to put together a plan for how to do that, cost estimate for changing. I remember the granite pavers now versus what's there, and I think at the time we got a price of close to $20,000, and at the time it came up, we didn't have the dollars to take out what was there. So what I'd like to do is work with the current VSO, come up with that plan, fix the problem of benches being knocked over, put them back in the space, talk about a more permanent answer to shrubberies, because sometimes those are going to be difficult to maintain, and talk about the granite markers you identified, granite stones with the names, and have him come back over the next, it's probably going to take a little bit, several weeks to a couple of months, to come up with a plan for the entire space, and come back with a recommendation of this board, and then we'll figure out what the cost is and find a way to fund it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rand, for bringing this.
I'd like to
I
say
just-
thank you for all you do. I know you do so much for the veterans but do you have cost estimates? Do you have the plans that you would like to see how it would be restored? Do you have something that we can go out and look at? I mean, there are organizations in town that I'm sure would love to help with that
Well,
restoration project, because it's such a valid and such a wonderful project, and it really needs to be done. So, do you have the original drawings or the plans that?
I have a set of the plans, and I made sure that DPW got a set of the plans, and I made sure that the Veterans Officer has a set of the plans.
Okay, so it's
I
well
also
circulated.
have been in touch with the Veterans Officer. I was very in touch with Jerry McGuire, and when Jerry retired, I immediately came down and introduced myself to the current Veterans Officer. In fact, I spoke with him today, and I told him that I was going to come in here and talk to you tonight, and I told him that I would always keep in touch with him and make sure that he understands that anything I know is with his direct support and approval.
So that's
Thank you
important.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Andrew, for coordinating that with our VSO.
Look, you come back.
Okay. Any additional public comment? Mr. Limpert? Nope, hearing none. Motion made by Selectman Keen to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Selectman Nobley. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We're adjourned.